Welcome to Mormon Book Reviews, where an evangelical encounters the restoration. I'm your host, Stephen Pynakker, and I'm very excited about this guest and also two new friends that I've recently got to speak to for the first time today. Got Brian Nettles, and you have a YouTube channel. What's it called? A
It's Book of Mormon Heartland.
Book of Mormon Heartland.
Yeah,
And
it focuses heavily on artifacts, the ancient artifacts, and some on Book of Mormon geography too, but it's mostly focused on the artifacts.
the reason why we're here is a very special person that over the course of the last year has made quite an impact on the restoration, and that's Chief Midegah. David Midegah, welcome to the program.
Yeah, I really, really want to thank you for had to come here. There's a bear in this house. I thought it was just the most fascinating thing. So yeah, thanks for having me on. And again, Brian, I'm glad to see you here. You're a brother in my life, and I'm just grateful that you came on as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you asked me to come on. To be honest with you, I mean this is an important day for you, and it's you know you know both we came from this LDS background. You were a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and I was too. I was happy to see you grow in that area, but then it was unfortunate to see how things just kind of the last few months have just kind of seems to have soured in a sense.
Hmm. Okay. And I want us to talk about your baptism today, but I also just for those of you who may not be familiar with the Church of Jesus Christ, I'd like to just kind of give a little background on it so people have a better understanding. This is their edition of the Book of Mormon, and it has the same versification as the Utah-based branch does. This is one of my most cherished members items in my collection because 11 of the 12 apostles of the church have signed this Book of Mormon and wrote down their favorite Book of Mormon verse, and it was actually the president, um, President Gehly, who actually went around with the Book of Mormon and had them sign it. And of course, he's the person that interviewed you. Now, the Bickertonites, they're often called the Bickertonites, but they are headquartered in Monongahela, Pennsylvania. And it came out of the ashes of Sidney Rigdon's attempt to start a united order, and so they get their priesthood lineage through Sidney Rigdon. And William Bickerton was really, in many ways, like a Brigham Young, who kind of organized the church when it was in disarray and kept it together. And then over the course of its own history, it just kind of was in its own little world, their own little sphere. They weren't part of the evangelical world. They were part of the Restoration, but they didn't really interact with other churches in the Restoration. And then over the course of the last 10 years or so, they received a word from the Lord that they were to start talking to other people, both other branches within the Restoration, but other Christian groups. And so this, I think, is part of a fulfillment of that prophecy within that church. And of course, I've had many members on the church. I love all of you at the Church of Jesus Christ. And David, it sounds like you found a church family.
Yeah, I think that was more important. I do want to share. I had a clarification this week. I had a dream that was, as you know, and Brian knows, the last year I've kind of put myself out there. And really I've just been saying, hey, there's more records coming, and there's peoples in North Central and South America that are communicating, and they're having large events, and they're gathering. And maybe this is something that should be taken account, because they're talking about the peacemaker a lot. And they know that this is associated to Jesus Christ. And so what I did is I had just said this, and unfortunately some things happened, which we can talk about if you want. But I had this dream this week where I was just 2 days ago, where I was walking up to a tree that had water coming out from underneath it that was pouring onto this really cracked earth. I walked on the cracked earth to get to the tree, and I could see the cracks, like it was cracked earth, and the water was causing this green grass to grow really fast, like immediately. And when I got to the tree, it looked like a normal tree, but there was this little bird that was on a branch, one of the branches hanging off, and it was peeling the bark off. And as it peeled it off, I saw a liquid, and it started drinking the liquid. And then it jumped and it went to another branch. And when it was on the other branch, the branch was a little bigger, it did the same thing. And it did a circle around the tree, going from branch to branch, tearing off the bark. And I had a realization that all of the branches are tree, all those branches, even that are grafted in, that they're receiving the same sap from the tree as every other branch, regardless if you're a really big branch. If you're getting equally nourished by the roots, and if you deny all of the other branches what it is that they receive, then and you believe you're the tree, you could actually tear the tree over if you get too big. And so I realized that I was okay. I was okay. And I found a home. Because that's something that's been important to me, is we know the peacemaker was Jesus Christ. That's what our records are stating. We know that the Nephite records, or the Book of Mormon, as you call it, that this person is heavily recorded in the tribal peoples of North, Central, and South America. And that as we are in our very last gasp, this is the last gasp, that spiritually, this is the only hope they have of survival, is to talk about their relationship with God.
Now, David, I know that, of course, you've had quite a faith journey. You originally said that you were baptized at the age of 9 into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but you made it feel like this was really like this baptism really meant something to you. And I wanted to ask you, what was it about the Church of Jesus Christ in particular that you felt called to enter into their church?
Well, I have moved up. This is important. That's an important question. I have moved up the circles, the rings, from regional chieftainships to national, to now at a grand governance lodge level. And along that way, you go through different ceremonies. And as you go through those ceremonies, there's a realization. When I was raised up into one of this matters what you just asked. When I was raised up into one of the four principal, which it was something I never imagined could happen, even a year ago. One of the four principal chieftain positions. There's those that guide the leaders, those that guide the providers, those that guide the healers, and those that guide the protectors. And so I was raised up for those that guide the providers. And this is a really significant position. And I went through these ceremonies, and I had to repeat the words of the great peacemaker that he had given to us: when you raise up leaders. I didn't know it existed. I had known enough about the peacemaker, but I had to repeat this. It took 15 minutes, and these are unchanged words that have been used to raise up all grand chiefs back 2,000 years. And then I was taken to a lodge where I was washed and anointed, and I was washed and anointed, and I was prayed upon. And I realized we're the remnant, and it remains. And Brian, you know what I talk about when you talk washed and anointings and you talk about covenants. I realized remnant means what remains. It's the truth that remains. And so I knew that what we were looking for was a mirrored reflection of us, not extra stuff, but a mirrored reflection of what remained. And as I went through my mission was to go to the Nephite records peoples. This was my tribal mission. My personal faith at the time was the branch on the tree. It's a grafted branch. Was the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. That's what I knew. But that's my personal walk. So professionally, I had to go to each of the Nephite records people and affirm that the Book of Mormon was true, and that we will be bringing forth more. But the core thing was, we're going to need help. That the largest majority of indigenous peoples are in Latin America. And that these doors would be opened to the Maya in the Yucatan, Guatemala, Honduras, Nicaragua, as well as the 6 tribes of Costa Rica and the Amazonian tribes, to include the Munduruku. That these doors had opened, and that we're going to need help. And so who's going to help? And this is what I did equally, because they're all branches on the tree. And what I found was they had a lot in common. They all, Brian, I went to every one, and I was the first person in 180 years that got them all to sit in a room together, and they did. Yeah. And they found unity in one thing they shared in common, and that's the peacemaker, Jesus Christ. And that they all believed that the Book of Mormon was true, and that they had an obligation at the end, if they happened to be that generation, that when the tribal peoples were slipping to go down the river into the rapids and their arms thrown back, that they would reach forward, and that God had provided the bridge to protect and safeguard our rise again. And all of the groups have the Spirit. All of the groups have a particle of truth. Every branch on the tree has leaves receiving light. Some have more, some have less. All are of no lesser value than the other to the tree and it growing. And so I found that. But the one that was a reflection of us, which was just very clear and plain, with no extra additions, it was just Book of Mormon, Jesus, baptism, spirit, and family, was the Church of Jesus Christ. And they welcomed me with open arms like a family. I had 125 people drive across a desert to an oasis just to be there when I was baptized. And when I was in the congregation, half of it was tribal people who had traveled from across the country just to be there. Because while the other churches have gone, the other branches have gone to other areas, this branch went to the tribal peoples, and they're the only ones doing it.
Yes, and actually, I think that's important that of all the churches in the Restoration that are still performing their mission to the Lamanites, as it was described in Joseph's time, is the Church of Jesus Christ. They have an active ministry in that field, unlike just about any other group within the Restoration.
And when we made the call, and there's a lot of signs we've been providing, and we said we're revealing a record. The people can say all they want, but that record is going to be put on an altar in front of 150 tribal nations in the Yucatan in March, and it's going to be sanctioned. They don't care what anybody else thinks.
Yeah.
And so it's true. And then it will be released in April, and 2 conferences. What used to be the RLDS is now the Community of Christ, and the First Peoples Community of Christ, and All Nations, and the JCRB, Joint Conference Restoration Branch, and CRE. We've got them all united, and they're going to have a joint conference in April, and they're going to allow they're assisting us to be there for our leaders to speak in a joint conference. And they're going to present our book. The very next week, we will be in Pennsylvania with the Church of Jesus Christ at another conference doing the same thing, because they just got to cross the St. Lawrence River. It's super easy. And they all are actively participating. And then when we said, I went to the Maya and I walked in, and on day 1, they named me a Mayan chief, opened 68 communities to me. My family, we've been trying to say our families were connected. And we said, we're going to need some help. And here's what was amazing. The Church of Jesus Christ didn't even blink. We're all in. And they have stepped in to assist us in what we need to do there. And so we can talk more about that if you want. But this was the house that warmed me. The other house, which was my house, and I thought was my home, as Brian knows and many know, that for an entire year, the people did nothing but attack me, shame me, and seek to slander me without cause. And I was just doing tribal duties, even so much that lower level officers in the church who are unpaid, but they're still corporate officers bound by federal law, even informed us that our tribal marriage licenses wouldn't be accepted for temple sealings, and that we had to get state marriage licenses, which is a violation of the Federal Commerce Clause in the Indian Non-Intercourse Act, telling an Indian that they don't accept their tribal licenses, it's not real, and they have to go subject themselves to state jurisdiction. We didn't file lawsuits, we didn't report it, we just asked for an explanation. Never got a response. That's just the way it is what we got told. I then at a conference got stopped and almost kicked out of a building because my necklace that I received from an Iroquois Haudenosaunee chief during a big meeting in the Mississauga had rainbow. They tried to kick me out because they said the security, this isn't hired security, this is church security. Yeah. Said I was in the LGBT community and need to get out of the building. It was kind of a shock. They did apologize for that, but then never followed up with the training that they requested. And then the last thing was they entered another corporate. I'm just sharing some dirt, some things that were just kind of like, wow, it's too much. And it's not me. I'm not disgruntled. I just am disappointed. I was in the Temple Lot Church of Christ, and I was talking. This was a different corporation. It's a completely different organization, and members of the stake and bishopric actively of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints actively entered the building and withdrew me from the building, and informed me I had no authority to speak with any restoration branch, And then the following morning, they provided a big list in written form about how all tribal peoples needed to submit themselves to the door of the bishop who had supremacy and authority over them. That even the historical site that we found in southern Missouri, which is a temple, that we had no authority to call it a temple, and only President Nelson could say it was. And that even though we know our language, that the scriptures, the books, our history that is being translated by people that read it, that we had to turn it over to the church and we couldn't release it. And so we sent a letter from a law firm to their law firm that just said, hey, these things are a little bit rich, that some of the things that were stated in it's a little long here, but some of the things stated in the letter provided to us in Independence from the church were violations of some federal laws. And we said, we just want to notify you that this is what's happened. And we did receive feedback from 270. But the feedback was that we only could work with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And that's a problem. That's a problem because our family is far bigger than that. And so it hurt me very bad. And we asked for just some explanations. And we asked specifically, can you please ask your members to dial it down, as they were bombarding our elders in Canada with threats, with hate mail and hate messages. Would you please ask?
What kind of threats?
Oh, that they're going to show up and harm people, that they're going to break into the house, that we're going to hell. Just tons of everything you can admit. Gotcha. That I'm apostate. That we're frauds.
I've heard that one.
That we're frauds. And the problem is that what they don't understand is that they're talking primarily to people that are living victims of genocide. And so this is when it becomes complicated, because you have knowing that 80% of our living women over the age of 60 are sterilized.
Yeah.
And a quarter of our men from the 1960s and 70s, 100% of those over age 60 couldn't be raised by their family and couldn't raise their children.
Yeah.
You got to take a different approach. And there was
Could I back up a little bit? Because the thing that gets me is, our entire conference that we did in Wisconsin was based on outreach, and the church that I grew up in, the church that I grew up in does a lot of outreach. We get together as a community and we clean up neighborhoods. We do food banks together. And when I reached out to you guys, I had I felt impressed to reach out to the Ojibwe, and I had no idea I was going to meet someone who was a member of the church and that was going to affirm the things of the church. And so it just kind of went a different direction than I expected it to, but it's still all about outreach. And my personal thought is that, when it comes to the gathering of people together, why wouldn't we have outreach? Why wouldn't we work with everyone? We could work with the Calvary Chapel. We could work with the Catholic Church. Why can't we work with the other remnant church, followers of Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon? To me, it's like, you talk a lot about the tree and the root and the main branch and the grafts. And, when I plant trees in my backyard, I basically learned that there's always a main trunk. That's the main tree. And then everything's the graft after that. You've got the roots below and everything's the graft. They take the main trunk and they stick a graft on it. And then if you want to produce fruit all year round, you graft and graft and graft different variants of your same fruit. And so, I understand the claim and the issue about authority. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is very strong in the take that we are the only ones that have the authority to exercise the priesthood. But still, do you think that Jesus Christ only loves the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? Do you think that, okay, the celestial terrestrial kingdom, is the dividing line between who goes to the celestial and who goes to the terrestrial kingdom? Is it going to be baptism into the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and everyone else is not going to be in the celestial kingdom? I just don't know that I buy such a doctrine, And so if a church is bringing you closer to Christ, then I think that's a good thing.
End of the day is, who is it that's safe and loving to the tribal peoples, that isn't going to seek to replace them, diminish them, shame them, and was welcoming. And it was clear as day as I stood on that stage and as I've been working with them, I'm surrounded by my own people.
Hmm.
Nowhere else am I surrounded by my people. And why do my people feel comfortable there? You have to go there and feel it yourself. It is a
Gotcha.
spirit that is so unique that I found myself, and I am not someone who's short on words, but I'm sure you're probably like, man, these guys are taking the show over.
It's
I
okay.
was I was on the stage and I almost was speechless.
Hmm.
And I was shaken by the spirit I felt. It was so overwhelming.
Now, so I just want to know, was this so you didn't did you not were you not planning on getting baptized? Was this a spur of the moment thing that happened? And what do you
No,
think
this
led up to
is
it?
this yeah, so this has been the last month.
Okay.
There's been an active in December, we had something remarkable happen. As many know, I was diagnosed with a very rare form of tumors a year ago in the spring, and that it's caused some periods of incapacitation and a tremendous amount of medication that I had to be on. And I pushed it as far as I could go. And in November, they were transferring me to a more in-depth care center. It happened to be in Missouri, which was pretty shocking. Springfield, Missouri. It's like the radiology center of America. And and it was bad. And I was going to have to go into either radiation or immediate surgery or a little bit of both. And so they broke for holiday. And January 3rd, I had to report back to do a final review before they started something. And I had a visit in December from President Gehly. He's the presiding apostle of the Church of Jesus Christ. And one of the most, and he came personally to me. He felt called, and he brought one of the heads of the 70 and Wayne Martirana, and they met with me and spoke with us and discussed what it was they wanted to know from the horse's mouth, what were we doing? And we shared, and they did something that was remarkable. They gave me an anointing. Brian, we would normally call this a blessing. This was an anointing. And I've received a lot of blessings. I had never received an anointing except in our lodge. And it was the same. And when they prayed, he commanded the pain to go away. And many know I was in constant pain. And the pain went away immediately. Immediately. This wasn't brainwashing. It went away and it stayed away. And I was able to travel to the Yucatan in December when otherwise it was being canceled. And I showed up in the Yucatan and immediately they had a massive ceremony and the Grand Chief down there and, welcome home. Your family's from here. We already knew that. We've been trying to tell everybody. And they're like, attacking Midegah about our model. It's Mezzo and Heartland. Take your sideways and turn it at an angle and just stop it. And so, and if you won't listen to the Indians, we only have to listen to you. Come on now. And so I went on January 3rd and that was amazing, by the way. And another sign to the restoration branches, hey, this is real and this is happening. This is 68 communities of the Maya that are in the Yucatan that are connected to all those in Guatemala, Honduras, and Nicaragua. It's one family. And so another sign that we're trying to provide, like this is happening.
Hmm.
And I got attacked for going, but I got attacked. And here's the thing: we were only getting attacked in the last 6 months, 100% by members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Brian knows it. And the thing is that, and it's all over authority, but no corporation has authority over us. We are not a corporation. A corporation is a leaf attached to a branch called the Commerce Department that extends to the Interior Department of a celestial government called America.
Yeah.
Your ordinances are services. And so this is why we were so concerned that we were being denied the right to have some of our people who are members to get sealed in the temple. You don't have the right piece of paper. It's ridiculous. So I went January 3rd and they did the full evaluation, MRI, a CT scan. And then a week later, I received the findings and I was informed that there was a 60% reduction in my tumors and the growth, and that I no longer needed radiation therapy or surgery, that they were going to wait another month and look at it again, that it appears this can happen. It's really rare, even though the doctor said this is kind of a miracle, David. If there's miracles, this is a miracle, David. And that they were going to look in February and March before they decided to do anything because it might go away or diminish to a point that it doesn't matter. I have had zero pain since that blessing. And so I knew when I was coming to this conference, I knew, I felt it the day I walked through the door that I was home. Half of the conference was my people.
Yeah.
So if you want me to feel home,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a chief and half the people are my people.
So, David, I just want to share with you that when I first started this channel, I didn't know a single Latter-day Saint. And I went the very first door of a church the very first Restoration Church door that I darkened was my local Church of Jesus Christ congregation located about an hour, on a little over an hour's drive from where I live. And I will tell you, I felt the Spirit. And it was a remarkable, miraculous story that actually I feel like the church played a major role in changing the trajectory of this channel when I had a conversation with uh, Patrick McKay, who you probably know, in Independence, Missouri, was telling me about the Songs of Zion hymnal, this miracle hymnal that was created by this person who couldn't carry a tune, and did 240 plus songs in this miracle hymnal. And when I had that conversation with David that Saturday night at 8:30, I realized, oh, this is supposed to be a secular scholarly channel. But then I realized, oh, the Spirit's going to enter into the picture now and then too. And so I think that we're all on spiritual journeys. David, yours has been a really interesting one. I want to wrap this up, but Brian, I just want to mention, so about a year ago is Brian, about a year ago, you started communicating with David. Maybe just talk about what your thoughts were when you have this individual just pop out of nowhere and have these remarkable claims being made and stuff.
Well, it really, I really feel that I was led. Um, I told you earlier today, I almost felt like I was Nephi being led to Laban, but at the same time, I didn't lop off David's head. So, it was like um, I felt inspired to do the conference, not knowing anybody. I booked the place, not knowing anybody, and I thought I'd be lucky to get 100 people there. And then somehow I came across. I know how it happened, but it was really the hand of God. Where I met Jody Taylor, who introduced me to David Taylor, Chief Midegah, and it just kind of took off from there. But it was most. I will tell you the day that I spent with Jody Taylor and her friend Annette House, the spirit was so strong. I mean, it was probably the most spiritual day of my life. I had never felt it so strong. Uh, that's too much of a statement to say never, but it was up there as one of the most spiritual days of my life, and it led to meeting Chief Midegah.
And this was
And
your
so,
conference that you organized in Fond du Lac,
yeah,
Wisconsin.
and I never believed that the conference was really about the conference.
Okay.
I've always believed that it was about something going forward.
Okay.
And what is going forward is you see the saga of what's going on with Chief Midegah. You see that the records of the Nephite people are being prepared to be made available. Perhaps even the brass plates are being prepared to be made available. And that's all because I followed the Spirit and met Jody and then met David, Chief Midegah.
Well, I have to say,
And
there's a lot
so
of
to me, this is not something where I'm going to sit there and say, oh, I don't like what Chief Midegah is saying, or he's saying something that maybe seems to be opposed to what my church is teaching, and so I'm going to walk away from him because I'm not going to walk away.
Well, I
So
appreciate that. And I think, there's a lot of people within all the different branches of the restoration that are anticipating the coming forth of records. I was telling you about David
yeah,
Gill, Matthew Gill's, the Chronicles of the Children of Aranak, and other records that are purportedly coming up throughout the world of telling their ancient stories of their interactions with the Savior as well. And David, I just wanted to ask you one last question. So what was it like to be baptized today?
Prior to this, my only memory was when I was 9 years old and I was baptized. And so, and it's, it was indoors, and this was different. I was driven through it. There was an anticipation because I didn't quite know what to make of what was going to happen. And so I was driven, and there was apostles from the JCRB that came. And think about that. The Church of Jesus Christ was recognizing other branches' right to be on the tree. They spoke in their conference. These are remarkable things. He's an Indian too. And so we drove through a desert. I'm in a desert. I'm down in Arizona. I'd never been here before. A desert. Where am I going? And you turn a corner and there's this like big sea in the middle of the desert. It's blue water. And it was shocking. It was kind of shocking. I felt like I was like by the waters of Mormon or something. It was very unique. And then I went down to the water and I turned around and there was like 100, no less than like 125, 130 people that showed up just for my baptism, that drove an hour into the desert just to say, welcome into this house. And I was led out into the water by President Gehly, the head of the church, with all of the apostles standing on the shoreline. And the level of respect and love that was shown is indescribable. And when those words were said and I was lowered in that water and I lifted out, it was legitimately as if I went into darkness and rose into light. And there was a stillness that came upon me that I have never felt in my chaotic life. And I knew that Jesus was here. And I walked to the shore with him, and they sat me down and they confirmed the Holy Ghost upon me. And everybody started singing. The Spirit was, and it's there, and it was so unique. And I've never experienced anything like it in my life. I wish for all my children to feel what I felt. I felt that was clearly felt by all the people there. And I felt for the first time a stillness and calmness that everything was okay. As all of these people said, we are with your people to the very end. And they laid down their entire consecration to assist us in standing back up because I'm their brother. And I realized half the people there were tribal peoples. And as we were there, a former Grand National Chief of the Navajo Nation called on the phone and said he wanted to be baptized too. Something is happening. It was the most, there's a moment that meant the most to me in my life prior to this, and it was when my son David was born. It was the first child. I was there, and I held him as he came out, and I put him on my chest, and I fell in love with Jesus in that very moment that I had my son. And that's what people forget when they attack. I'm a dad. But this moment is up there as one of the most pinnacle sacred moments of my entire life. And I would wish that all people would stand back and reassess Romans 11 and Jacob 5 that talks about the tree and about the natural branches that are removed and the unnatural branches that are grafted, that when they bear no fruit or they harm the tree or they harm the other branches, they are removed and the natural ones are re-added. And that's what we are seeing down through the Maya and the Amazonian tribes, is those that had been torn off for, hey, Lamanites did some bad things, okay? That they're being grafted back in. And those who are in forgot they're not the tree. They're not the tree. And without the tree, if they planted themselves on their own, they would wither and die. Now, I will say this. It was clear to me that a lot of the restoration branches have been sailing their ships on the winds of my ancestors, as recorded in the Book of Mormon. And this has changed your families, changed your communities. There's a lot of extra stuff that was added along the way that Sidney Rigdon and the Bickertonites, the Church of Jesus Christ, wanted nothing to do with. They wanted so if people say, why can't I just have the Book of Mormon and have nothing to do with the whole polygamy thing? They never touched it. Why can't I just have the Book of Mormon and not be in an organization that took tens of thousands of children from their tribal families? The only restoration branch that didn't take children from tribal families was the Church of Jesus Christ. That's why it's filled with Indians. We are releasing records starting in April. Again, due to the attacks in March, it's going to be put on an altar in front of 150 chieftains. The Amazonian chiefs are coming up. It's real. And and what's that mean? We're providing some more wind.
Hmm.
So
Well,
so if
I
you're not going to sail your ship with our wind, you're not going to have any wind.
Well, David, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on. And I was texting Josh, and he was sending me some images of the baptism, and that I've actually been able to use for the thumbnail. So when I release this, and he just said this is all he said at the very end is this is all about the Lord. That's all. That's what Josh Gehly had to say.
Yeah.
So I want to say, if it brings us closer to Christ, what are we to do to mock it or disparage it? David, seems like your spiritual journey. I noticed you had you were very happy and relieved and relaxed when we started the conversation before we started taping, and I really felt like you were in a good place. And Brian, it was so great to finally got to meet you. I've heard of you. I'm glad we were able to talk on the phone, and I want to thank you so much for being able to put this together.
Same for me. I've watched many of your podcasts and I've loved them. I really have. When I was a driver, I had your podcast on one of my hot buttons, so I was listening to quite a few of them.
That's great.
But
Well, I do
I haven't
appreciate
seen
that.
any in a few months though. So
Yeah, well, we've been doing a lot of stuff here at MBR, and of course, I just want to thank everybody for all their financial support of this channel. Couldn't do it without you, and all the prayers. My mom and I have been going through a lot. This has been a very difficult year for us, so we just want to thank you for all the thoughts and prayers directed towards us. It's been an interesting year for you too, David, and I want to thank you for coming on the program.
I really appreciate it, and I would just call all those that are Nephite record believers to get ready, because everything you've been waiting for and your ancestors have been praying for is something you will experience in your lifetime. And it's the rise of the tribal people spiritually. Politically, they can't rise. Economically, they'll never let them rise. Spiritually, no one's stopping our rise. And we're grateful for all of those that chose to hold on to that record and to reflect back to us who we are, because it's who we were and will be again, and we're there. And so, regardless of which branch you are on the tree, I love you and you have a place with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that word, David. And remember, the most important thing is this: all the voices of the restoration will be heard here on Mormon Book Reviews.